meeting on the 3rd of March 2022. I'm going to now say an open statement. Can I welcome members and officers to this meeting of the Development Control Committee, which is due by government advice to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting will be recorded and will be available via the Council's website, due to be viewed as soon as it is practically following this meeting. Everyone participating in this meeting will be accessing this meeting from a remote location. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off and are on silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points for the record. The agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras off at that point. I will ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, that all other times you will keep the cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize the background noise and interference and ensure the connections remain as stable as possible. If members and officers wish to raise a point or questions, they should press the hand up icon on the screen and on the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, which will come to you in the order I have received requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button will also be disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until you're invited to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will support in the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary will mute those not being used. I will also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They should too also ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. In the event of the committee requiring a vote on an item of business, therefore, it is in the meeting, I will ask the officers of Democratic Services to perform a roll call of members in attendance and indicate how they wish to vote, for or abstain. I will then ask the legal officer to announce the decision made by the committee. Now I will proceed to the agenda business. Chair will read out and turn to. Oh, right, you are, Chair. Thank you. I just done you now.
It's a check meeting, the 20th meeting. All of it. I couldn't bloody get on it, Teddy.
Right, Chair. It's on to you now. Then I've read that out for you, so you can go on to the agenda item.
Thank you very much. Are there any apologies, please? I've got 3 here. Mike Kern, Councillor Clark and Councillor Webster. Are there any more, Mark, please?
I don't know if Councillor Clark is... Councillor Clark's here, Chair.
Is she all?
So just the two.
Thank you very much. Right. Are there any declarations of interest, please, from members and officers? None. Could I have the approval of the minutes, please? The 27th of January. All in favour?
I can't move them, Chair, because I wasn't in that meeting.
Can someone move it, please?
I'll move them.
Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Right. There are no public speakers today. Item 5, addendum sheet. There is no addendum sheet either. Item 6. Can I note the Development Council Committee guidance?
There is an amendment sheet, Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yes, there is an amendment sheet.
Is it?
Yes. Yeah. There's only one item on it, Chair, but it is one.
Have we all read it? Thank you very much. Right. Item 7. Landed just to T. Gwyn, Eula Greg, Puthcall. Ailey, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. Got a presentation, so I'll just bear with me and I'll bring that up. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ailey?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, members. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Hayley Kemp, Principal Planning Officer. This application relates to the resubmission of a previous planning application reference P18618 FUL and seeks full planning permission for the erection of 3 detached dwellings and associated works on land adjacent to Tŷ Gwyn, Hilo Graig, Porthcawl. Members are advised that the previous application in 2018 for the erection of 3 detached dwellings and associated works at the above mentioned site was approved subject to a Section 106 agreement by the Council's Planning Committee on the 11th of October 2018. The Section 106 agreement was not signed within a reasonable time period, and despite numerous attempts with the applicant and their agent to engage with the local authority in an effort to issue the decision, the local authority decided to finally dispose of the application on the 12th of April 2021. The applicant has now engaged the local authority to sign the 106 agreement, and this application has been resubmitted with a proposed scheme that is wholly the same as the previously consented scheme in 2018. Therefore, the proposed scheme comprises of the erection of 3 5-bedroom detached dwellings, all with associated landscaping and parking. The dwellings will be L-shaped in form and 2-storey high. The proposed design and materials of the proposed dwellings will reflect the character and appearance of the Newton Conservation Area. Access to the site is via a private driveway off Hilo Graig. The application also proposes the removal of 6 trees on the site and retention of existing trees along the eastern boundary of the site, together with new planting to provide a habitat for wildlife. 4 letters of objection have been received from the neighbouring residents regarding overdevelopment of the site, concerns regarding the proposed access, impact of heavy construction traffic, the scale and size of the houses are out of keeping with the character and appearance of the conservation area, loss of light and privacy, and impact and loss of wildlife. Members are advised that in May 2017, the same scheme was proposed and similar concerns were raised by the local residents, and the planning application was refused by the local authority on the grounds of overdevelopment and lack of private amenity space to serve the future occupiers of the site. In view of this, the applicant appealed to the Planning Inspectorate, who, whilst dismissed the appeal on the grounds of a lack of a legal agreement for 30% affordable housing, disagreed with the local authority's concerns regarding overdevelopment of the site and lack of amenity, and considered the scheme to be acceptable, as displayed on the screen. Therefore, in view of this, in view of the appeal decision and subject to a Section 106 agreement and conditions, the proposed development is considered acceptable as it will not have an adverse impact on the living conditions of the future occupiers of the dwellings, will be served by an adequate amount of amenity space, and will not have a significant detrimental impact on the privacy or visual amenities of the area, nor significantly harm neighbouring amenities. There are also no drainage, ecology or highway safety concerns raised. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to a Section 106 agreement for a financial contribution for the sum of £115,153.20 for affordable housing, which will be received by the Council's Housing Department and spent in areas where it is needed across the county borough. This is also subject to compliance with the conditions stated within the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hayley. Could I have a move on a seconder, please?
I'll move, Chair, the officer's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. I got one speaker. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is there an actual plan of the area? I'm not quite understanding whereabouts it is. I know where Hilo Graig is, but I'm not quite sure where Tŷ Gwyn House or whatever it is called. And can I have it explained to me how the Section 106 is worked out? For three houses, I mean, 153,000 seems an awful lot of money to me for just to be building 3 houses. So perhaps if that could be answered, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Hayley, let it come back, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. In terms of this site, the site is just located off Bridgend Road. So it's. Would you prefer me to pull the map back up, Councillor?
I would if you would,
Yeah,
Hayley,
try that,
please.
Okay. Can you see that?
No.
No.
No?
Chair, would it help being the local member if I describe where it is?
That would be it for Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, councillor.
Yeah, Nora, if you come down from the Heel of Graig from the centre of Newton Old Village there, as if you're driving down it towards Bridgend Road, just before you get down to the bottom, on your left-hand side, there's an entrance, and that entrance leads into this parcel of land. It's literally just backing onto Bridgend Road, but it's difficult to see from Bridgend Road. Does that help?
Well, I think it does. So it's not actually positioned on Heel of Graig then, is it?
Well, yes, it is. The access to it is off the very bottom end of Heel of Graig.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And what was the other thing? Oh, the Section 106 monies. Can somebody explain how that is actually worked out, please?
There's it's based on the size of the houses and the area. The Section 106 officer has sent me a breakdown of how it's worked out. Would you like me to send that to you, councillor?
Yes, I will be grateful, Hayley. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
All right, Councillor Clark.
Yes, fine now, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Watts, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All I wish to say is that I've been aware of this application since the very beginning and fully aware of all the objections of local members, and I'm content that they have been dealt with. My concern, although this is also touched upon in the report, is the 6 mature trees that are at the back of the development. I'm always concerned, although there are tree preservation orders there, recent events, shall we say, elsewhere in Newton have shown that sometimes these things are not necessarily protected. And I just want reassurance that the trees that are protected are left in situ, and that those that are cut down, new planting, sufficient planting will take place. I know as these developments develop, demands change, but I just want reassurances that trees will be left in place and that replanting will take effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Hayley, you want to come back in, please?
Yeah, thank you, councillor, for that. Totally agree with what you say. And there's a condition on the consent, condition 13, asking for landscaping details.
Yes.
And there's also condition 14, which asks for tree root protection measures to protect the existing trees that are on there during construction. So that those concerns and issues can be addressed under that.
Yes, I think you know what I'm referring to, where local people are very conscious of trees having been removed recently. So I suspect that when this development starts, they'll be watching equally as thoroughly and diligently. So
I understand, yes,
yeah.
but hopefully we've got conditions in place for that,
yeah,
okay?
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Bowsy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Right. My question is regarding the 106 agreement. I think that, you know, this application obviously has to be approved because it was previously approved in its entirety. You mentioned exactly the same. Is the 106 agreement exactly the same sum as 3.5 years ago?
No, it's actually gone up because it's index linked. I think previously, I can't tell you the exact figure, but it has, I can tell you it has.
That's the answer I wanted to hear, because obviously, you know, whatever reason they didn't.
Yeah.
You know, there's been no benefit gained in terms of indexation on this 106 in their favour for delaying it. So I'm pleased to hear that that was index linked, and I'm happy with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks very much for your observation, anyways, looking after the council. Right. I got no more speakers. All in favour of the council's recommendation with conditions?
Aye.
106.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you, Hayley. Item 8, please. Land at the rear of 30 and 32 High Street, Ogmerville. Phil, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Phil Thomas, the Principal Planning Officer. Yes, it's agenda item 8. It's an application for the erection of a two-bedroom dwelling. But members, it's an outline application. It's agreeing the principle of the development. All matters of detail are reserved for future consideration. But on your report, on page 32 of your report, you've got some indicative sketch plans showing you what the site is like and showing you what the potential intentions are in terms of the development of this site. It's to the rear of 32 High Street, which is on the main road running through Ogmore Vale. As I said, those plans show that it's quite a steep site, a very steep site, in fact, and that the dwelling will occupy the most elevated section of the site, fronting Glyn Street. The site lies immediately to the north of a parking area that serves a development known as Phelas Wessex, which is a flatted complex, and to the south of the rear garden of 28 High Street. Members will note from the planning history that the council refused an outline application for a 3-bedroom dwelling on this site in 2021. The reasons for refusal are set out in full on page 31 of the report, but in brief, we were concerned that the constrained and steep nature of the site would result in a poor standard of residential amenity for the future occupants. The development could have an impact on the privacy of the neighbours, and we were not confident the site could accommodate the required off-street parking facilities, which could have resulted in on-street parking to the detriment of highway safety. Although the appeal that was subsequently made against the refusal was dismissed, the inspector did not share a number of our concerns. So a couple of things to note. Firstly, this is an application for a 2-bedroom dwelling house with either a single, integral or attached garage. I draw members' attention to the consultation responses that we've received, and you'll note that no objections have been received from those parties. The Principal Highway Officer Development Control, Mr. Rob Morgan, who's in the meeting today, is now satisfied that sufficient parking can be provided within the site, and I'm sure if you've got any queries, members, Rob will be able to hopefully answer those questions. Unlike all the recently refused applications, on this submission, residents have provided comments, and members will note that objections have been received from the occupiers of 26 and 28 High Street and 1 Phelas Wessex. A summary of the objections are set out on page 34. The main issues for members to consider today are, and in the determination of the application, are the principle of the development, its impact on the character of the appearance of the street scene and the surrounding area, the impact on the neighbouring properties, and the more minor issues in this case, drainage and ecology, and of course, highway safety. Principle of the development, in broad terms, it accords with many of the policies of the local development plan. It's a brownfield site, it's underused, and that was a view shared by the inspector who considered the appeal. There wasn't really a question about the principles, but there was an acknowledgement that you can't develop all brownfield sites because you've got to make sure that the developments you provide on there achieve that high quality that we're looking for in all development schemes. And then in achieving that high quality, you're seeking to protect neighbouring amenities and also ensuring that appropriate levels of car parking are provided. In terms of impact on the character and appearance of the street scene and the surrounding area, the dwelling will be relatively prominent. It's one of the first buildings of significant scale on the western side of Glyn Street, but the parameters of the building are relatively modest. And although the indicative design does not necessarily follow the pattern of existing housing on Glyn Street, it should not be so out of keeping with its surroundings to warrant a further refusal of permission. And it should be noted here that the inspector made no comment on that in the decision letter. Impact on neighbouring amenities and the amenities of future occupiers. Taking privacy first, if I could, we have made some representations in our appeal statement about the impact the development could have on the properties on Glyn Street. You've got a situation there where this new dwelling would directly face existing properties on Glyn Street at a distance of about 13 metres, which is less than the privacy standard. But the inspector did not share our concerns on that point and took the view that it's very difficult to achieve high levels of privacy when you have highway frontage development. Privacy is generally considered in relation to windows that directly face each other. On the information before us, there are no habitable room windows in the properties at the lower level that directly face this site. That's 1332 High Street. On this application, representations have been received from the properties to the north. However, based on the indicative plans, there would be no direct views into the neighbouring properties. At the detailed stage, careful consideration will have to be given to the position of windows on this new dwelling so as to minimise the impacts on neighbouring properties. By proximity, however, some loss of privacy is inevitable, but in the views of the inspector, such an arrangement is typical of densely built-up residential areas. In the early applications, the council had expressed concerns about the potential of overlooking from the garden areas of this new property, in particular the relationship with the property known as Felix Wessex to the south of the site. The inspector noted that there would be some scope for overlooking, but was confident that that was no different to the current arrangements where those garden areas are already overlooked from other properties. On the issue of loss of outlook, we've looked carefully at this again because we've had representation from the properties to the north of the application site. But whilst it is a very elevated site and this will be quite prominent and seen, it doesn't lie in the direct line of sight of the properties at 26 and 28 High Street. And although there's going to be some impact, not to the extent that will warrant a refusal of consent. Level of amenity space, we had put to the inspector that we felt the kind of steep nature of the site and the terrace gardens wouldn't provide a particularly acceptable level of amenity space. The inspector took the view that the gardens would be sloping, but not significantly so, and that it could provide a pleasant sense of openness and space to the rear of the new dwelling. Furthermore, the inspector noted that the level terraces could provide sitting out areas and general domestic activity space where people could dry their clothes. Taking all the above into consideration, the inspector was of the view that a scheme could be designed and laid out in a way that would not have an unacceptable effect on residential amenity and on the living conditions of future occupiers. The one issue where we were successful on the appeal was in relation to access and parking and the original scheme not providing sufficient car parking. I mentioned earlier on that we've now got a two-bed scheme before us, and on the basis of the current guidelines and that this site being in a relatively sustainable location, the guidelines suggest that one car parking space for a two-bedroom dwelling would be acceptable, and our plans that are submitted have indicated that space can be provided on site. We have included, members, an additional condition on the amendment sheet regarding any garaging facilities that will be provided on any future development being a garage and a garage only, and not allowing, and that can't be converted into a living accommodation. So that's an additional condition on the amendment sheet that I just bring to your attention. On the other matters of detail, drainage, biodiversity, ecology, ground conditions, we've all looked at that carefully, and we believe those matters can be addressed by conditions. In the light of the previous planning appeal decisions, this application is recommended for approval on the basis that the principle of developing this site for a single two-bed dwelling accords with both national and local planning policies. The concerns that have been offered by residents have been considered, but would not justify a refusal of consent, particularly having regard to the inspector's consideration of such matters. Reducing the size of the dwelling from a three-bed to a two-bed, and providing a plan that indicates the car parking could be provided addresses the previous highway objection. The recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll formally move the recommendation of the officer and the amendment sheet, Chair.
Yeah,
Thank you.
second.
Thank you very much. I got no speakers. All in favour of the recommendation?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Right. Item 9, please. Number 10, Kynewood, Brackler. Rodney, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Roger Davis and I'm the Development and Building Control Manager at BCBC. This application seeks consent to undertake the pollarding of 3 hornbeam trees at 10 Carnewydd, Brackler. Trees are situated in the rear garden and are protected under an Ogwer Borough Council tree preservation order from 1988. The application originally sought consent to more or less completely reduce the 3 hornbeam trees to 2-metre high stumps. The application was subsequently amended to incorporate the much lesser works of pollarding the 3 trees, and more clarity was provided regarding the location of the trees. The application is referred to committee following a call-in request by Councillor Spanswick. The trees are proposed to be pollarded to different heights due to the variation in the existing heights of the 3 trees. At the request of Councillor Spanswick, the Countryside and Tourism section was consulted on the matter, and whilst a right to light is not a usual justification to reduce or carry out works to protected trees, an individual's usable garden space is a consideration. It is important to note that the trees will not be felled or removed with this application. The hornbeam trees themselves are in a very close proximity to each other and appear to have a very heavy lean towards the applicant's garden, with the majority of branches growing over the garden area. It also appears that the trees have been pollarded in the past before. They are not considered to be overly visible in the street scene, either from Caerl Newydd itself or from the Honeysuckle Way in the other direction. They form part of a larger group of protected trees along with more dominant species. As explained in the report, if the amenity value is lower and the overall impact is likely to be negligible, it may be appropriate to grant consent even if the authority believes that there is no particular arboricultural reasons for the work. In this instance, a repeat of the works to the trees is likely to have a negligible impact on the amenity of the area, and as such, the pollarding of the trees to the same level as previously undertaken is considered to be reasonable, and permission can be granted in this instance. It is also considered that reducing the weight of the trees will assist in their health and hopefully prolong their lifespan. The proposed works will not adversely impact on the public amenity value of the area and can be justified in the interests of good arboricultural practice. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rodney. Could I move in a second, please?
I'll formally move, Chair.
Second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Rodney, for the report. And I can assure you, it was not, I didn't intend, it wasn't my intention to try and get this to come to committee because I thought it could have been dealt with prior to that. But unfortunately, it appears not the case. I did make a representation at the beginning because the quality of the plan submitted and the accuracy, I'm surprised they even got past the fact of being accepted as an application. That was quite surprising. And then the accuracy, the wrong address, but we got that. And then the agent was asked to provide a tree report justifying the works. I'm not convinced the agent, the applicant has provided any tree report to justify the works, which then led me to ask, well, can we have some comments from our own officers in BCBC who experienced from the countryside section to give their views on it. Now that's been requested, but I'm not aware if anything's been received. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but there's nothing been no response been received. I mean, the fact that this initial application was to end up with 2-metre high stumps is worrying. I know that's not what they amended them, but there's still no tree report justifying the works. And this is a line of trees in an area of Bracknell where there's been some other works taking place, rightly or wrongly in the past, and it's slowly removing the sort of amenity value that's there. And I do disagree because there is an amenity value of these trees, and they are visible in some of the photographs that's shown in this report from Honeysuckle Way. And I would beg to differ that there's a higher amenity value than officers are making out on this section. So one, I'd like to know, the countryside and tourism section has been consulted, but there's no response. So we've had no response from somebody experienced with trees in BCBC, and there's no report from the applicant, from an arboriculturist. And this right to light, from a planning perspective, I accept that, looking at the usable amenity space, blah, blah, but there is no right to light, and these trees are protected. So I find it really disappointing that we've got other trees along this line that are not for sort of not part of the application now, but I try to think on the future. And these trees, okay, they've been polled in the past, but that doesn't make an excuse, so we should continue to do that unless I see some technical report saying that it's good for the trees, because the fact they were polled in the past and now are leaning to one way, maybe there's a question the job wasn't done that great in the past. But there needs to be a professional report about these trees, either from the applicant, but even if it's from the applicant, we still need response and views from our own officers at BCPC. So I don't accept the recommendation today. And I'm just checking my notes here. No, I don't accept the application. I'll be voting against it. I don't think this is, currently we have enough information from somebody professionally qualified, from a professionally qualified arboriculturalist.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rod, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we informally consulted with Rob Jones, who has some experience of knowledge of practice on trees, and especially protected trees, and he advised that there's the justification put forward is not sufficient justification to carry out the works, but we have to look at it from a tree preservation order point of view, and why was that tree protected in the first place as part of the group value of that band of trees, and it's the public amenity value of the trees, and I can probably show, if I show the photograph from Honeysuckle Way, if I can find it, here we go. No, not that one. So that basically is the photo in the report showing what we've suggested is the best way forward, is to pollard it to these different heights, because they're different heights of the trees. Initially, they wanted to cap it, or basically make them tree stumps down to about 2 meters, which would be down to there, which was obviously not acceptable. In terms of their visibility from public vantage points, you can sort of see trees in the gap in between the two properties on Carron Newydd, but more prominently, I suppose, you can see it from Honeysuckle Way in the gap between houses. So in a short sort of stretch of the garden, that's what they look like now, effectively. So they're not in a supreme condition, but and you can see the trees leaning into the garden there. Back in, when was this? 2009. Same view. These trees in this location is a lot better condition. So it's probably, as I mentioned in the report, it's probably the best way is to try and prolong the life of these trees, is rather than suffering under the weight of the trees as they are at the minute. We feel that it makes sense to pollard them again in the same way as happened before, just to take that pressure off these trees. And obviously it's not to do with losing these trees. We're not felling them completely, or the applicant's not felling them completely. It's just pollarding them 3 horn beams down to a reasonable level. In terms of mentioned earlier about the advice from Rob Jones, it's basically just talking around the justification of it. And in terms of getting a formal tree report of the applicant, in this instance, if he was arguing that he wanted to fell them and get rid of them and was adamant that that's what he wanted to do, then I think we'd be within it'd be reasonable for us to ask for that formal tree report. In this instance, due to the restricted amount of works to be carried out to the trees, it was considered that it wasn't wholly necessary to have a report from a qualified tree arborist or tree surgeon just to justify these works. So we have to take that into account, sort of a fact and degree of the reasonableness of asking for formal reports on a small number of trees. So but like I said, if they were looking to remove those trees completely, then I think it would have been the case that we would have insisted on a tree survey and a proper report just to justify that. But in this instance, that's not the case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rod. Can I have a move in a second after the report, please? Before I go pick any more councillors in.
I'll formally move the report, Chair.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Rodri showed a slide of where the trees were going to be cut. They had lines through the trees. I wonder if he could bring that one back up and could I and other members be told how high those are going to be cut at, please?
When you're ready, Rod, please.
Or pollarded, I should say. Sorry.
Yes, pollarded. Let me just, what am I doing now? Where's the picture? Right. So normally a fence is about 1.8. So they would have wanted them capped or stumps to 2 meter height at that point. So you're looking at double that to around there. So that's 4 meters. Looking around 5 meters there. I'd say 6 meters, potentially 8 meters or 7.5 meters up at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Laura?
Yes, fine, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Denny, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the little that I know about trees and pollard and etc., it is something that if you want to make sure that it is the healthiest for the trees and to deal with the sort of situation and reasons that are given by the application, this is something that needs to be done every couple of years. It needs to be something that's kept on top of. As we've already mentioned, that it has been done previously, but I don't know how long ago that was. So I think it would be really beneficial for us to actually have a proper written report about this, and the fact that if we do say this now, this is something that's going to have to be an ongoing situation in order, so you don't have it that you've got the heavy branches at the top, which is why you need to do pollard and on a regular basis, so we don't have the issue as described previously. So I think before going forward and saying yes, I think this needs to be more of a long-term plan. If we say yes now, it will kind of in a way give us the sense that we have to say yes to this every time this comes around, and I think this is something important that we need to consider when looking at this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denny. Ronnie, you'd like to come back in, please, and explain to him what we've actually done and what they were sort of wanting to do.
Yes, Chair. I think it's like Councillor Denny. I don't profess to be an expert in trees, so it's one of the things that we get involved with, and we're expected to know a bit about, but none of us profess to be experts in the field. But in this instance, if I show it again, is pollarding is effectively capping it off at these heights. So you're taking off the pressure from the higher bits, especially that heavy bit of the tree there, just to prolong the life and put less pressure on the tree, so less weight on the tree, so it's can have a longer lifespan. So as the report mentions, when the site was inspected, it was quite clear that these trees have been pollarded in the same way previously, and I think obviously since then they've sort of redeveloped, but they need to be maintained again in this sort of way, just to preserve their life. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rod. John, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back and thanks, Roddy. I wasn't aware that, I think the words used, informally consulted with Rob Jones, who's probably the most experienced tree person left at BCBC. And I forget to clarify what he said. I think you said he wouldn't support the works, which I'm disappointed I haven't received any report back, because that's all I was asking for at the beginning, was somebody from Council Section to give that sort of formal, not informal, but a formal report back. And the photograph shown to 2009, again, that's a bit disappointing, because that's 13 years ago. So I'm not sure what the benefit of showing us a photograph from 13 years ago, what the trees were like during summer, and then we have photographs during leaf fall. And the photographs you see, the trees are covered in ivy. They may not be in brilliant health, and all the more it needs that report. It's not a like matter to being like this one. I'm quite disappointed, to be honest, that the way I would say that we have this report before us today, when I've asked for, well, a report from Officer PCBC. I don't get one, and now we're told there's an informal discussion took place. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's fair enough. Mayor, yeah, you're right. We asked Rob for his comments, and the comments effectively reiterated that loss of light, i.e. the reasons put forward by the applicant for these works, is not technically the correct reasoning to put forward to justify any works to a protected tree. So it's not that he wasn't in support of it or didn't agree with it, the way it's the works are being proposed. It's just more of a case that the principle of it was not supported, because in effect loss of light is not the proper justification for any works to a TPO. But in this instance, whilst that's what the applicant is aiming to benefit from, we have to look at the amount of usable garden space and the potential lean and danger into that garden space, and look at it from a public amenity point of view. So that wasn't a photograph from 2009, though. That's the Google Street View of it. So it's just to give you an idea of what it looked like compared to now, really, and how they've deteriorated. And to stop them deteriorating any further, then I think this is, in arboricultural terms, this is probably the best thing to do to it. You're correct. If they were looking or justifying removing the trees completely, then we would have looked for a full and balanced trees report from an expert in the field to justify that. But that's, I can't reiterate this enough, that's not the case in this instance. We're keeping the trees. It's just a case of some maintenance to the trees to ensure their longevity. Thank you, Chair.
I bring Jonathan name not be a stagger rod.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Jonathan Parsons, Group Manager for Planning and Development. I'm aware that Councillor Dendy wants to come back in as well, Chair, but I'll keep this brief if I can. The main consideration for us in looking at tree preservation order applications is the amenity value that the tree has in the area. That's the main reason they're preserved. We also got to consider the health of the tree and the long-term maintenance of the tree, because if that tree isn't maintained and it subsequently it falls down, there's a loss of that amenity in the future for future generations. At one time in the authority, we did have a tree officer within the planning service who was able to go out and inspect the trees and make an informed judgment on the health of the tree and the necessity of the works. We don't have that facility anymore, and unfortunately we have to rely on other teams that are not necessarily resourced to actually do that work either. I take on board the comments made by the members earlier. I would think I'd like to suggest, Chair, that we may wish to defer this item in order to go back to the applicant and ask for further information. I think we need to have a little bit more advice from a qualified tree specialist, arborist or arboriculturalist, I'm not quite sure which is the correct term, as to whether the works proposed are going to lengthen or prolong the life of the trees and contribute to the health of the trees. If I'm not sure if members would feel about deferring this, we get some further information.
Thank you, John. Dan. Councillor Denny Can you be brief, please? I can,
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say, just a quick look now at RHS on this situation, that pollarding is something that will, with this type of tree species, is something that would be beneficial. But it is also a case that this is something that needs to be done every few years. I was wondering, is there any possibility within this going forward that there's some sort of putting it in there if this is done, that it has to be done every X amount of years and things like that, or is that something too far kind of out the jurisdiction of this sort of application? Thank you.
below that question, I would tell, I bring John in. John, do you want to defer this?
As I was going to say, Chair, thank John for his views. I think matters should be deferred because regardless of any works on a tree, the TPO there should be at least a report, because we're saying, well, Roger's saying the health of the tree needs to be considered, but we don't know what the health, there could be that it's not in a healthy condition. There's a lot of ivy on it, and it may be. So I think before making an informed decision, there should be a report from an arboriculturalist on the health of the tree. Not just this case, any case, like there should be a report from in that respect. So I move there be deferred pending that report being provided.
All in favour of this?
Chair, hang
Anybody
on.
else got a second?
Chair, I have
Yes.
to formally withdraw my original proposal for acceptance of the officer's proposition, and I will formally do that. And the seconder has to do the same, and then we can go down the route of moving what John wants.
Who was the seconder, please?
I'll happily second that, Chair.
I was the original seconder, and I'm happy for that to be carried out.
Thank you, Richard.
And
All
I
in
will formally
favour
move
of
now,
getting
Chair, that we go
deferred?
down the recommendation that John
Right.
Spansworks has said, that we defer this application.
All right. All in favour?
Yes.
No, I'm afraid.
Sorry. Put your mic on, please.
Sorry, yeah, I support the officer's recommendation and would vote against deferring the decision.
Right. And we got a second, please, Councillor Posey. Is anybody prepared to second Councillor Posey, please?
I think he said, Chair, that he was just going to vote against it. He wasn't putting a proposition.
I thought it was a.
I said he was. Matthew was only saying he was going to vote against. He didn't. put
Correct.
forward a
I'm voting
proposition.
against deferment.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I thought you heard you. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was right then, wasn't I? Thank you. Right. John rather. John's in. Oh, I better take the amendment now. One. Jonathan, can you come in, please?
Hello, Chair. My understanding is that the original recommendation, which was moved and seconded, has now been amended so that now the recommendation is to defer this application pending the submission from the applicant for a full arboricultural report on the health of the tree and the works that are being carried out. That's my understanding. Jane, is that your understanding?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay. So it's whether this needs to vote or whether this is something that can. Yeah. So
Jane,
Can I come in here, Chair? This is quite simple. It's for or against.
Right.
The recommendation that's been put forward now to defer it. Because you've got one councillor saying, no, he's going to vote against it.
Yeah. Jane, can you count the votes, please?
Yes.
All in favour for the officer's recommendation now to get it deferred, please.
Aye.
Who's that
Mike,
for,
Chair,
mate?
Are you going to read the names out, or you can just, Mike, you'll have to read the names out.
If I do a roll call and Jane can count up the votes and Amounts at the end, the for, against, or abstain.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Keith Edwards.
For the deferment, Chair.
Councillor Gary Thomas.
For.
Councillor John Spanswick.
For.
Councillor John Paul Blundell.
For the deferment, thank you, Mike.
Councillor Ken Watts.
For.
Councillor Matthew Boise.
Against the deferment.
Councillor Noah Clark.
For the deferment, thank you, Michael.
Councillor Richard Collins. For the deferment, Mike. Councillor Richard Granville.
For, Mike.
Councillor Richard Young.
For the deferment, thanks, Mike.
Councillor Ros Sturman.
I can't vote because I didn't join the meeting at the beginning of this subject, so I guess you have to call that an abstain.
Councillor Sorrell Dendy.
For the deferment, thank you.
Councillor James Radcliffe.
For the deferment.
I believe that's everyone's share.
Thank you, Mike. Jen, what's the count, please?
For 11, against 2 and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Right. That's it then. It's going to be deferred. Thank you very much. Right. Item 10, please. Appeals. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of appeals received since the last meeting, but we've also had 2 appeal decisions. One of them is for an extension to a property where we were refused on the basis of impact on highway safety, car parking, and amenity to impact on amenity of adjoining neighbours. The inspector in this case agreed with the council's case and supported our parking standards and our SPG on residential amenities. So reinforced the policies that we apply. The second decision, which I think is probably of more interest to members, given that the subject of the last item, and this was in relation to an appeal against the refusal to allow the removal of protected trees. Now, this is on land of Tondy Road, not far from Pascoe's Avenue, and this site itself has been subject to a number of planning applications for development. One of the primary reasons about refusing the development was the impact on the protected trees. The applicant or the developer came in with an application to remove the protected trees, independent of any other planning application. There wasn't sufficient justification, and the inspector in this case sided with the council and agreed that the majority of the trees be retained. Now, the decision is interesting is that it's split, so it does allow some trees to be removed, but the bulk of the main bulk of the trees are to remain. The trees that are to be allowed to be removed are ones that are already diseased or dying or actually dead. So I think this is a good case for the council. It also reinforces the case for the refusing the wider development of the site on the basis that the trees have a good amenity value within the landscape and within the area, and that's the principal reason why they were protected in the first place. So I think this is a particularly good case for the authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Item 11, please. Outdoor recreation facilities, new housing development, supplementary planning guidance. This is Gareth and Brent, please. Whoever's first, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Gareth Denning and I'm the Strategic Planning Team Leader. I'm going to introduce this report, but it also gives me an opportunity to introduce Brett Holdsworth to members of the DC Committee. Brett joined us as a planning officer just over a year ago, and in doing so has enabled us to progress the SPG to where it is today. So before handing over to Brett, I'd also like to thank Councillor Spanswick for his contribution. Councillor Spanswick has called for the introduction of this SPG for a number of years, and his personal and professional input has been invaluable, and it's ensured that members have had a voice in the process. So the purpose of the report is to inform members of the outcome of the consultation exercise on the draft Outdoor Recreation Facilities Supplementary Planning Guidance document, and to seek agreement for the proposed amendments to the draft document and to adopt it as SPG to the Bridgend Local Development Plan. So now I'll hand over to Brett, who'll take members through the background to the report and the outcome of the consultation exercise. Over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Gareth. Good afternoon, members. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Brett Holdsworth and I'm a Strategic Planning Officer within the Council. On the 16th of January 2020, the Development Control Committee resolved to approve draft SPG 5, outdoor recreation facilities and new housing development as the basis for public consultation. So a 6-week period of public consultation was held between the 21st of February and the 3rd of April 2020, and the consultation was advertised in the following ways. Statutory notices were placed in the local paper on the 27th of February and the 5th of March. The consultation documents were made available for inspection with representation forms at the civic offices. Information on the consultation, including all the documentation, representation forms and how to make representations, was placed on the Council's website, and a copy of the draft SPG was sent to approximately 300 targeted consultees, including community councils, planning consultants, house builders and housing associations, taken from the LDP database. So by the end of the consultation period, 9 representations were received on the draft SPG. These representations are summarised in Appendix 1 of the report. Appendix 1 also sets out the proposed changes to the SPG for each representation received. So in summary, the main areas of change are as follows. To amend the average household occupancy rates based on 2011 census data and to keep the rates under review to inform future revisions of the SPG. To clarify the relationship between outdoor recreation facilities and sustainable drainage systems and emphasise the importance of pre-application discussions. Confirm that financial contributions in lieu of on-site facilities should be of the equivalent value of providing the required facilities on-site, and to add sections on Section 106 agreements, negotiations with developers and viability to ensure consistency with the Education SPG and to provide greater clarity as to how the SPG will be implemented. Committee has therefore recommended to approve the proposed changes to the draft outdoor recreation facilities and new housing development supplementary planning guidance contained in Appendix 1. If committee agrees with the recommendations in paragraph 9.1, to recommend to Council that SPG 5, outdoor recreation facilities and new housing development, be adopted as supplementary planning guidance to the adopted Bridgend Local Development Plan. That's all from me. Thank you for your time, members. Gareth and I are happy to answer any questions you might have on the SPG. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brent. Can you move to note the report, please?
I move the officer's recommendation, Gary.
Second, please.
That.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spanswick, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Gareth, and welcome, Brett. There's a great team there working in the background to getting this done, and I have been a bit of a pain nagging for, I lost track how many years, but we're getting there. This is nearly, well, it is there. I just want to clarify a few points on some of the comments sent in, which were probably expected by some developers. But there was a point there submitted on page 7 of the appendix from Bridgend Town Council referring to litter bins. And that's again something that I've raised, not so much litter bins in play areas, but that we have scope to make sure the litter bins are provided in any sort of open space area, well, even streets as well, but I know that's outside perhaps the scope of this, so that we are putting the onus on developers to provide litter bins rather than leaving it, and that the local authority have to provide it later on down the road, where that's open space areas play areas or general highway areas. There should be litter bins provided by developers. The point which is noted in a couple of areas, but I probably Lambo on page 10 of the appendix, is about attenuation ponds, or the tendency to build in sort of drainage areas into landscape areas, the sort of areas that will take water if the main sort of sewage during high rainfall. And quite often they're built, and they also try to be put in as play areas or play space or open space when they're an engineering function and not a play space. I think from what I'm reading, the way I read it, the officers gone back and are not accepting what I think Lambert Homes have objected to that being not part of an open space, which is correct because they're not play areas, they are engineering structures to take floodwater. Yeah, I see it's on page 11 of 21 appendix. Lambert Homes strongly object that balancing ponds attenuation areas cannot be considered open space. So that's, I think we're agreeing with that. From what officers have written, responses gone back. The point that's just made out there by the house occupancy levels on page 14. It does say there's no data available from the 2011 census that directly correlates to providing average occupancy rates. So I'm not sure if the figures we're adjusting it in line with the 2001 census or the 2011 census, because we have gone down the occupancy levels, which will make it less of a contribution from developers in line with. It is difficult because it is now saying the household, a 4-bedroom house will work out calculations on a three people occupying a 4-bedroom house. If that's correct, I accept, but I'd rather if it was higher. The more we can request from developers, and the more the better. And the last point, Chair, it is right at the end. It's on page 19 of 21 of the appendices. Just for clarity, is somebody called HBF submitted a comment, and the decision and action response is to do with requesting community sum in lieu of perhaps facilities being provided by a developer, which is great. But there's also the issue that if a developer doesn't provide, say, for example, a play area, and they provide £40,000 or £50,000 in lieu of that play area, it shouldn't be just that, because there is an issue. If they provide the play area, they have to provide in the future maintenance costs for the play area. I'm not sure if what we're saying is that they can provide a contribution in lieu of on-site facilities, but then we're not going to ask for an equivalent maintenance cost that they would have had to provide had they provided on-site facilities. Just to make sure that we are getting the full amount and the correct amount from developers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brent, please, will you come back?
Well, I'd probably refer to Gareth on that one. I think he's a bit more knowledgeable than me on that subject.
When you're ready, Gareth, please.
Thank you to Kenneth Spencer for his comments. Just to pick up on some of the issues there. Yeah, with regards to the issue that HBF raised about the maintenance money, I think we provided clarity there just by saying that developers will be expected to provide a contribution that's equivalent of what they would have provided on site, and that naturally will include the cost of whatever facility that we'd be looking for and the maintenance that went with it. So it's not a sort of, what we were anxious to ensure is that there's not a loophole there for developers to provide less by way of money than if they were providing it on site. With regards to the average household sizes, we received a comment there from Savills, and essentially what the census information doesn't do is provide us with a directly comparable data set. But it does provide information that we can use as a basis, essentially, to provide sort of numbers of people per different sizes of house. The information that we originally had in the draft SPG was almost based on anecdotal evidence, and there wasn't too much science behind it. So all that we've done is slightly tweak the figures, not made a massive difference, to ensure that if they were challenged, that there is justification behind the figures that we will be using. What we've also said is that those figures will be kept under review, because we're aware that a census was carried out last year, and as soon as that information comes to hand, we can, if needs be, look to tweak those figures again. So I think that one of the key things about this SPG is that it's not going to be sort of adopted just to gather dust somewhere. It's something that we will keep under constant review and update the information as and where necessary.
Thank you, Gareth. John, you're happy with
Yeah,
that?
thank you, Gareth, and thanks for the team for it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I got one more speaker, please. Ros, please, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Councillor Spanswick actually covered the question that I was going to ask in the last part of what he was saying. Gareth answered it. I was concerned about maintenance of things like playing areas and that. So thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor. I got no more speakers. Thank you both, delegates. Right. Remember now. Item 12. Listed buildings concept delegation. I got Claire and Moira, please. Whoever's first.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the purpose of the recording, my name is Claire Ham. I'm the team leader of Conservation and Design section in the Strategic Regeneration Department. The purpose of the report today is to advise members of the committee of the intention for us to apply for listed building consent delegation and to outline the necessary procedures, commitments and benefits of acquiring such delegation. The report helps in the achievement of the smarter use of resources within BCBC, but it also forms part of its statutory duties in relation to the determination of listed building consent applications as part of its existing planning service. Currently, local planning authorities are required to notify Welsh ministers via CADW where they are minded to grant listed building consent. However, wherever possible, Welsh ministers are now keen for listed building consent decisions to be made at a local level, and they are able to amend the requirement to notify CADW. For example, Welsh ministers are able to direct that certain categories of applications for listed building consent need not be notified to them by a local planning authority, and there's currently a general direction in place removing the requirement to notify CADW of an application for listed building consent for work affecting the interior only of Grade 2 and starred listed buildings. So that's just the interior. Last year, in 2022, there was also some amendments made in relation to local authority-owned listed buildings as well. So there are those amendments already that have been made. Certain local planning authorities have already successfully applied to extend these arrangements to include all Grade 2 listed buildings, with the exception of applications for total demolition. And one authority in Wales has been successful in extending these arrangements to include applications affecting Grade 2 star buildings. CADW refer to these as extended arrangements for listed building delegation. And many members will have attended the training that we offered yesterday on the different grading levels of listed buildings, and we hope you found that helpful. On the 9th of December in 2019, CADW sent an invitation to all local planning authorities in Wales to apply to remove the requirement to notify CADW of applications for listed building consent affecting Grade 2 listed buildings. That's except for total demolition. So that is an exclusion in this case. The removal of the requirement to notify CADW takes out a really time-consuming and resource-intensive part of the listed building consent process for both CADW and for the local authority. It strengthens local decision-making and it makes the service more available and timely and efficient for the public. If successful in applying for delegation, the notification process will continue to apply to any application which involves the demolition of a listed building or works to either a Grade 1 or a Grade 2 star listed building. In applying, local planning authorities will need to demonstrate that they have the right expertise and processes in place to make robust and sound decisions which protect and preserve the historic environment. Listed building consent delegation is given to those authorities that have a robust local policy framework supported by sound processes, practices and decision making informed by specialist conservation officer advice aimed towards the conservation and protection of the historic environment. CADU, on the other hand, will always maintain close working relationships with these local planning authorities that obtain delegation through an annual review process and can continue, as they do now, to support the authority in terms of advice and guidance at the request of the Conservation Officer. As a minimum criteria, CADU require that each local planning authority should have the following in place, and we are confident at Bridgend that we have these criteria in place now and we are ready to apply. We must have a robust local policy framework in place, reflecting the principles set out in Planning Policy Wales and TAN 24, and the recent review of LDP policies actually confirms that we have actually taken on board the new legislative requirements and the national guidance on board in terms of the wording of those policies. They must provide evidence that it's able to provide applicants with clear and informative advice on the management of listed buildings, including a pre-application advice service. And our pre-application advice service has been existing for a number of years now. We offer this on a regular basis to owners of listed buildings within the county borough, and there is a really good take-up of that, so that's in place. And we have to demonstrate that at least one of the officers in the authority involved in decision making on all listed building applications has the necessary specialist expertise and experience to judge the merits of a full range of listed building consent cases. And for those who attended the member training yesterday, you would have met our Senior Conservation Officer, Moira, who's on screen with me today, who has over 32 years experience in historic building conservation. So this is why we are looking at, applying at this stage. If the application is successful, the delegation will be awarded to the named officer. So it won't be to the authority as a whole, it will be to the named conservation officer that is nominated as part of the process. It's intended to make this application in line with the guidance provided with the Senior Conservation Officer present within the Communities Directorate, identified as the named officer. The full requirements of the full application are all contained within the appendix, and that includes the guidance of the application that has to be put together to be submitted to CADU. In terms of financial applications, funding is in place to support the Senior Conservation Officer, the named officer within the Directorate until December 23. A couple of issues were raised yesterday at the training, so I just thought I'd add a couple of comments here. The application will be made using existing resources within the Directorate. An opportunity will exist to review pre-application arrangements and fees if we are successful in our application to CADU, but there will be no other direct implications through applying for listed building consent delegation in regard to appeals and awards of costs, etc., etc. Nothing will change from the current situation in the situation that an appeal is received by Welsh Government or by the authority. And looking through the records, there's a very low risk. In the last 20 years, there's only been one appeal against the refusal of a listed building consent application, which is very low. And I think that is shared by most local authorities across Wales. So in terms of the recommendations, it's recommended that members note the contents of the report before them today, support an application for listed building consent delegation, and also receive a further report on the outcome of that application in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to move in a second and note your report, please.
I'm happy to move
the
that.
recommendation of the officer, Chair.
Thank you very much. And could you go back to item 11 and move and second that, please, as well?
I'll formally move that, Chair, that we note it.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you both, Claire and Moira. Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Item 13 up is BCBC LPA response to the Welsh Government consultation on the amendments to the town and county planning. General permitted development, order 1995. Rod, please.
Thanks, Chair. As the deadline for the response to the Welsh Government consultation expired on 15th of February, the response has been submitted, and the recommendation to members is to note the content of the report. If any members have any questions about the proposed changes to the PD rights in Wales, the permitted development rights in Wales, please drop me a line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I'll formally move we note that then.
Second.
Second.
All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Aye. Yeah.
Item 14, training law. Jonathan, please. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, we had the training yesterday on the listed building delegation, which I thought was quite interesting, and I think members were of the same view. It did highlight that we could possibly look at more training in the future on heritage items, and the hour session we had yesterday really only scratched the surface of the whole heritage issue. We got conservation areas that we could look at, and historic parks and gardens, historic landscapes, and also looking at the setting of a listed building, which is another material planning consideration we have to take into account by law. It's in the Listed Building Act. So I think in the future we will look at doing some more heritage presentations, and Claire and Moira have indicated they're happy to do that. We've got another planning committee towards the end of April, and we are looking to bring an item, again this was requested by members, we could bring an item on very topical. It's trees again, and green infrastructure in particular. I think we will be doing this internally, and we will be looking to bring Rob Jones in to give us an indication of the green infrastructure approach to development. This is a key sort of policy feature of ours, and we do have SPGs on this, and this is something that is highly supported through the LDP and then the replacement LDP. On the amendment sheet, you'll also note that we have penciled in a member training session for the 24th of May. This is we do this every couple of years, usually after the election, when there are new members likely on the planning committee. We run more detailed training sessions to bring all members, old and new, up to date on the policy position and the regulation position, which does change during the years. So I think it's good for everybody to have a refresher training on this. We are using Planning Aid Wales, and they will be coming in to deliver this training, and officers will also be there. And it's hoped to run this as a live event, if we're allowed to, or even as a hybrid event with some members joining online if that technology allows us to do so. So we'll keep members up to date with this, but that's something for your calendars. As you're aware, all members or new members will have to undergo training before they can sit on the Development Control Committee, and we're trying to get this in before the first planning committee scheduled for the council year. So that being the case, we will probably defer the training session on rights of way to a later meeting. Other items in the pipeline then well, in principally is a workshop session on our supplementary planning guidance on design. So that's something, again, we always encourage members to get involved in our SPGs, and we did the same with our open spaces SPG. This has gone through was in committee today, so we'll do the same thing with our design SPG. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. And before we leave, I'd like to thank the Vice Chair for standing at such short notice. Thank you, Richard. We got no other business. Jane, is it? Jane, please.
Yes, for the avoidance of doubt, could we move and second the amendment sheet?
All in favour?
I'll formally move we note the amendment sheet.
I second that, Chair.
All right, Jane?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You take care, all. And watch the road.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
bye. Ta-ra.